Hello and welcome to Navigating to Success. I'm Jeff Carlton, certified focal point business and executive coach, and I am extremely pleased to have a fellow engineer, a fellow Wyoming business owner, Chris Lovas out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. So, Chris, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for asking me to come on.
Yeah, you bet. And fellow musician as well. We talked about that a little bit before we got started. So, Chris, tell us about Lovas Engineering and what you guys do.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a civil engineer and went to North Dakota State and got my bachelor's in civil engineering. And I came back to Cheyenne 2010 and worked for a company that I had done a couple summer internships with. And anyway, spent 11 years there at that firm and learned a whole bunch. And I was a junior partner there, and real grateful for my time there. Fast forward to 2021, I think February in 21, some things during succession planning came up that we decided to part ways, and kind of opened an opportunity for me to get out and kind of go my own direction, and without having many strings attached. And anyway, started Lovas Engineering. I'm, like I said, a civil engineer, and I do mostly land development, residential subdivisions, commercial site design, and then a little bit of public infrastructure. So water and sewer, road
Right.
design, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I grew up. I was son of a land surveyor, so I
Yeah.
worked with civil engineers. I did all that stuff all my life. So, how big are you now? What's the size of your company?
So a whole one. So I'm the only guy, um, technically with a W-2 paycheck with Lotus Engineering, but I hire a lot of sub consultants, and mainly, weekly I'm working with. I've got a team of sub consultant drafters that I use, and
Okay,
then yeah, and then we also subcontract out a lot of other, like you said, you're son of a surveyor. We use surveyors for every single project. And then geotech, traffic engineering, I usually subcontract that stuff out as well.
okay. So this one's a little bit of a reach, but do you sub anything out offshore, overseas, virtual folks, or are they all local pretty much?
Um, Not overseas, but my drafting is all virtual. Yeah, don't have any in-person interactions, which was, a big change for me coming from, it was a small firm, but big for Cheyenne. We had, I think,
Sure.
we'd fluctuate between 25 and 30 people. And, all of our drafters
It
are
is a
young
big firm.
EITs. Yeah, all of our young EITs were in offices right next door. So we could walk next door and talk about plan changes, red lines, et cetera. So that was a big change for me, but it's worked out well.
Yeah, and and now that everything is on CAD as opposed to the old Ryko
Right.
lettering machines and the ultrasonic cleaners for the pen tips, and oh
Yeah,
man,
that's right.
that was a way back there. Let's talk about your journey of, let's go back to 2021 of you kicking out and starting on your own. What did you find were the big challenges that you didn't expect in becoming a solopreneur?
That list is long for sure, but one of the more intimidating things to me coming out, which definitely was a challenge, but turned out to not quite be the mountain that I had seen it as I had started climbing, but was more of a bump in the road. I never took any accounting classes in college or any business classes, so I kind of thought that I had a good base for the technical side of things, the engineering, project management, even personal, interpersonal skills dealing with clients and stuff. But I really didn't know much about the actual ins and outs of a business, just simple accounting even. So that was one challenge that I had early on, was just figuring out where to start and what resources to use. But those things that kind of discouraged or distracted me on the front end, I went back again. I wouldn't be near as intimidated by those. So
Yeah, and that's an incredible important lesson that walking into it is find people that are smarter at the stuff that you're not smart in
you hit the
and
nail on
and
the
and,
head.
and outsource it, right?
Right.
So let me talk about technology a little bit. Civil engineering and land surveying, I mean, GPS was a game changer, for sure. What about AI? How is that playing into the civil engineering field for you, if at all?
Man, that's a loaded big question that I do kind of ponder from time to time. Whether it's laying in bed at night worrying how AI is going to take my job or company someday, or really just more so trying to figure out how it's going to be incorporated into our industry. One of the ways that maybe not necessarily AI, but specifically, you talked about the transition from pen and pad drafting going to AutoCAD. Number one, 30 years ago, I wouldn't be able to survive as a civil engineering business as a one-man shop because
No.
you rely so much on drafters, which I still do, but like you mentioned, it can be done virtually now. That's one of the ways that it's really opened things up. One thing that I think is going to be impacted by AI, maybe first, at least in the civil engineering world, is overlap grading is a something that I think is going to be easier to apply AI to than anything else with regard to civil engineering. Just figuring out basically, being son of a surveyor, a lot of topographic surveys go into laying out a site and looking at an existing site and then figuring out how that site needs to look when the project is complete is something that I bet AI probably can already do.
Well, yeah, and for people that are not in the landscaping and development, I mean, there's so many things that have to go into it with watershed, sewer, water, where you're going to put the electrical lines. Laying out a subdivision is not as easy as drawing a two-dimensional picture on the ground. God doesn't make the earth level.
Correct. Yep.
It's a big deal. So what are your future plans? What are you looking at expansion, or are you pretty comfortable in your current state?
That's something that I think about and probably change my mind about pretty frequently. I really like what I'm doing, being the only person that I have to answer to. But it also, as you know, when you do everything, it adds a certain level of stress and responsibility that, can be spread out by delegating, which I do a lot of through subcontractors. But I also I like working with other people, and I still do that a lot. But I see even in the next few years bringing on somebody younger than myself to work with me by my side and just kind of see where it goes from there and see how what Lovas Engineering becomes.
So, on the engineering side, what about expanding into, having a staff surveyor or draftsman, so that you have that organic capability within your business? Is that appealing at all, or?
Yeah, I'll never say never with that, but the kind of how I've structured this business, has done really well in using my relationships with other companies that do those things. So surveying, drafting, being a couple of them. So I don't foresee expanding in that direction. The other company that I've worked with, we had, like I said, a full staff of drafters. We also had a full surveying department. So I know what that's like, and I know what challenges it brings. I also know, what benefits that brings with keeping all that in house. But I guess all that being said, not really looking to expand in that direction.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because just as we're talking here, I'm wondering if you're the new model of what a civil engineering firm looks like, as opposed to that old school traditional model where you had everything in-house and everybody was working shoulder to shoulder. And there was a lot of inefficiencies in that model because there was times where you had survey crews just sitting around going, we got nothing to do until they finish cranking out the what needs to happen next. So how much of so on that thread, how much of it is a balance of being able to call these guys on demand? What is your cost benefit of having people on demand or going, yeah, I'm a week out from being able to get to your project?
First off, there's definitely a benefit to having everything in house. Like you said, working shoulder to shoulder with your comrades. And I think there's a transfer of knowledge, especially that benefits people that are maybe in a younger part of their careers. But that being said, I've found that this model works best for me right now, at least in the stage of my career. So one of the biggest benefits, that's pretty obvious on the front end is when I'm potentially a little bit slower, I don't have to worry about keeping full staff busy, dealing with, the inevitable slowdowns in the economy and laying folks off. And then also, with this model, it may be a little counterintuitive, but I've found that my capacity is much larger. So, I can tap not only the current team of drafters that I use and utilize, every single week, but they inside their company have many teams that, if we get busy enough, and it's happened at times where we tap those other teams and they start producing drawings and spending resources on our projects. And so your margin for profit, which is, ultimately what a business is there for, is probably a little bit smaller with regard to the number of people that are working on your projects. But that being said, like I mentioned, I can work on many more projects at one time than I could when I was, keeping everything in-house at our old firm.
Yeah, there's an agility, but then there's that trait of knowledge that's going on, and the relationship building that happens with employees. But the responsibility of a business owner, that's huge. I mean, when you hire somebody, you're taking on their mortgage and their kids' braces, right?
Right.
Uh,
And I
you
do
have
love that part of it too, but it is definitely a responsibility.
Yeah, kind of rounded out here towards the end of the interview, but what were the biggest differences between working for the bigger, which sounds like it was a fairly well-founded
Yeah.
engineering house, to go in solopreneur? How did that affect your personal life, your work-life balance?
Kind of the stereotypical thought anyway for folks that work for themselves, and this is my business office, but it's in the basement of my house. But you're thinking, I'm working from home, I can set my own schedule, I can work as much or as little as I want to. That's true, but only to a small extent. I'm sure I work more now than I did, when I
Oh,
was
yeah.
essentially punching a clock. I was a junior partner at that other firm. But the difference is, there's a sense of pride and a different kind of motivation, and it's a different stress. The biggest difference in the day-to-day work and the types of projects that I work on is that I get to pick who I'm working with and which clients I take on and which projects I feel like are a good fit for our team and my company. Whereas before, I worked specifically for some of my clients, but I was our stormwater drainage specialist. So I kind of had my hands on every single project that came through the door. We had 8 partners, and you kind of get handed projects, which isn't a bad thing, but you end up
They're not the ones
responsible.
you would have picked yourself, though.
Exactly. Yeah. And as well as, managing those timelines. I think that's the biggest difference.
Got it. So last question. Are you hiring?
In the traditional sense, no, I'm not right now anyway, like I mentioned, potentially in the future, but I subcontract a lot of folks underneath my contracts for projects. I'm oftentimes, one of the first people that my clients reach out to when they're looking to develop a property or redevelop a commercial site, something like that. So I hired lots of subcontractors and subconsultants to work with me. And so in that sense, if anybody's, wanting to team up on a project, I am frequently looking to team up and hire lots of folks. So
What are any specific skill sets that you're looking for?
we, under our umbrella of our kind of master development contracts, for a typical contract, we're doing surveying, geotechnical engineering, traffic engineering if it's required. If we get into a project that has a specific need, for instance, like a large, right now we're doing a large commercial site in the county where we don't have access to water and sewer. So I'm working with some folks that specialize in wastewater treatment that's not connected to a municipal wastewater plant. So that type of thing. We use drone for surveying quite often and photography. And I'm sure there's a couple that I'm missing as well.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me and for everybody watching this business journey explored. I appreciate it. Hope some of the insights are helpful. Any parting shots, Chris?
Thanks to you, Jeff. I have watched some of your videos on YouTube here, and I think they're all great and have pulled some great stuff out of it. So I appreciate you reaching out and having me on.
Yeah, you bet. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time on Navigating to Success.